Now, this is a little known fact about me. Not a lot of people know this, but I love Luigi's Mansion. It's my favorite game of all time. You know, I mean, this really should be no secret to people who watch this channel. If you're not familiar with the channel, then definitely do hit that subscribe button down below. I would appreciate all your support. But recently, Did You Know Gaming actually posted a pretty decent video detailing some stuff that many people did not know about Luigi's Mansions 1, 2, and 3, all three of them. And today, we're going to kind of be going over them and honestly, my general thoughts on them. There are some things from that video that I'm leaving out, but if you wanted to go watch that video, go check it out right here. Did You Know Gaming posts some really cool content, and this video is among one of them. Before we actually get into talking about all the stuff we learned about Luigi's Mansions 1, 2, and 3, do know that I actually did post earlier this week, so this is my second upload of the week, and I actually did a Mario Kart Booster Course Pass ranking video. Swiftjar and I went through all of the booster courses and we ranked all of them together, so if you want to watch that fun video, definitely go and check it out. And yeah, that's about all I gotta say, so make sure to drop a like on this video if you haven't done so already, and without any further ado, let's get right on into the topic. So the first thing we learned, this one kind of is already well known, but we got a little more of the specifics about it, being Luigi's Mansion originally being intended for stereoscopic 3D, or at least that was the original vision, and then obviously it got fully realized in the 3DS version of Luigi's Mansion. So I'm glad that at the end of the day, this did end up getting realized, and some of the technology that they wanted to use for the GameCube did end up being further developed and actually did end up being part of the 3DS. So it was really cool to see that confirmed and to see all of that talked about. It was actually a really cool piece of information, at least learning a lot of the more intricate details about that. Because part of me wasn't sure about the whole Luigi's Mansion being intended for stereoscopic 3D. I wasn't sure if that was just rumors or the legitimacy of it, but it's nice to see that it's been kind of pretty much confirmed. And also, obviously, if you want to see sources, then Did You Know Gaming on his video, all the sources should be there, so in case you want to read into any of this a little bit more, it'll all be there. Next up, this next point is interesting and does kind of go into a theme that we're going to see throughout this whole entire video. Originally, before Luigi's Mansion was fully developed, Miyamoto had a concept of Mario being stuck under a bed holding a box with his arms just showing out from underneath the bed. This was done because originally, obviously, Luigi's Mansion came out before Mario Sunshine, so naturally they wanted Mario to be featured in Luigi's Mansion in some capacity, but they weren't quite sure how to do it. So this is one of Miyamoto's first initial ideas before it being shot down in favor of having Mario being stuck in a painting. Now, thank God this idea got shut down. Mario being under a bed with a box, what does that even mean? I mean, I'm sure Miyamoto would have tied it into the story somehow, but I do like the idea of Mario being stuck in a painting way more than that. Especially because, obviously, there's a lot of symbolism to Super Mario 64, where the whole freaking objective of the game is Mario hopping into paintings and seeing other worlds. So I am very glad that they did not go with that idea. So this next tidbit is interesting. One hot topic of debate with the original Luigi's Mansion in terms of cut content was multiplayer. People kind of knew that multiplayer was intended for the game in some capacity. Some believed that a Mario model pointed to this and all that kind of jazz. But apparently it actually ends up being that they wanted Luigi to meet Luigi, which, again, I'm kind of glad they strayed away from this. I mean, obviously this was further investigated in Luigi's Mansion 3DS with the introduction of Gooigi, but nevertheless, I am glad that that idea never really came to be. Alright, so now we are moving on to Luigi's Mansion 2. Now, this point is kind of obvious because it's Nintendo, but Luigi's Mansion 2's development was top secret. They had the code name, I think it was Green Onion, to be used around so that no one knew they were talking about Luigi's Mansion 2. It's really interesting that they actually treated a sequel, you know, over a decade after the original to Luigi's Mansion, as a really big deal, as a top secret. I'm really glad that they viewed it with that importance, and obviously we've seen the Luigi's Mansion series only grow with popularity, so I'm very glad that it was treated with the respect it deserved, at least when they were initially developing it. Here's where things get interesting. When they started development for this game, Next Level Games actually had a completely different vision for Luigi's Mansion 2. They wanted it to be a more top-down, gauntlet-like style. Think of kind of what you see with the Luigi's Ghost Mansion minigame from Nintendo Land, except completely top-down, and I honestly am so glad they didn't do this, because Miyamoto actually came in and said, no, I'd prefer it to be more like the original. Which, thank God that Miyamoto came in and said that. Miyamoto also did say that he wanted it to be episodic, but that does make sense given the fact that Luigi's Mansion 2 was in development for the 3DS. So yeah, I'm very glad they didn't just change up the formula, because one thing I always don't understand is when you're bringing back a series, or in this case it would be a game, a sequel to a game, that's been dormant for so long, and people just kind of want more of what that first game was because it had been so long, to completely change up the formula. I think it's just the complete wrong way to go about it unless you're doing a spin-off. Of course, Banjo-Kazooie also did this with Nuts and Bolts, and lots of series are guilty of doing this. So I am glad they kept it a little more traditional, even if it still was a little bit different at the end of the day. So not only did Next Level Games want to change up the gameplay of Luigi's Mansion, but they also want to change up the tone, which, as you guys know, that actually did happen. Next Level Games molded the humor and personality of Luigi's Mansion 2, a game about capturing ghosts in haunted mansions and spooky locations where it should be eerie, you're saving your brother, you're overcoming your courage. They molded it after Mr. Bean.
Hello.
Listen, I like Mr. Bean. Rowan Atkinson's a great actor. The humor is great in Mr. Bean. But when you're combining it with Luigi's Mansion, I just think it's so... I don't think it fits. You have the slapstick, kind of childlike nature of Mr. Bean, and mixing that with Luigi, and they even said they kind of molded Luigi after Mr. Bean, being kind of clumsy and easily spooked and, you know, very animated. I stand by my saying of, I think that was the complete wrong approach for Luigi. It's just not, because, like, Luigi is a coward, yes, but I feel like that just makes it almost like stereotypical. It makes it almost like kind of like the cliche coward where you're jumping at everything. The whole point of the first game is that you were toughing through the brave, you know, you were being brave and you were toughing through it. And every ghost that popped up, you just had like a little shiver and like, you know, you continued on. With Luigi's Mansion 2, there's like whole animations of Luigi being scared by ghosts and like being absolutely frozen in fear. And it was so goofy and just didn't fit, especially with the ghosts that ended up leaning into the slapstick goofy nature. I mean, you guys know my opinion on this already, but it just solidifies what I thought of the game's humor the whole time. I like Mr. Bean's humor, don't get me wrong, I watched Mr. Bean when I was a kid, but with Luigi's Mansion, it just doesn't fit. And I do think it is unfortunate that they did go in this direction, and obviously kept it with Luigi's Mansion 3. Another gameplay change that they were considering making was that the Dark Light originally was going to have a different purpose. Kind of like Link Between Worlds, A Link to the Past, and Metroid Prime 2 and all that stuff, there was actually going to be an alternate version of the mansion, kind of like two different dimensions that you could hop between, the normal dimension and the spirit dimension. In each room, you know, there's a portal that you can, use, I'm guessing, scan with a Dark Light, open the portal, go in it, and hop to the other dimension. I don't hate this. I don't hate the idea. I do think in a fourth game that could be actually a decent idea to explore, especially if you're doing one singular location. Having an alternate dimension version of it will, obviously it'll increase, like the amount of exploring you could do, given that there's two versions of the mansion, but if they're completely different, it could be a cool idea to explore. But I feel like with Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon's episodic nature, I feel like it would have kind of been a little weird in its structuring, because each level is pretty short, so you wouldn't have spent much time, in the dimension version of a certain room. I don't know. Like, you feel like you're not really getting enough time in each room as it is, at least in my personal opinion. I feel like you just kind of blaze through the rooms really quickly. So adding in the other dimension to it, I feel like just kind of does disservice to the mansions that they've already made. Because I do like the mansion design in Luigi's Mansion 2. And I feel like having, you know, the different dimensions there to kind of split that up, you know, when you're already there for not a lot of time, I think, like I said, would have done a real disservice to those mansions. Moving on to some multiplayer stuff, there was actually a cut Scarescraper mode called the Pest Floor. And this was cut because Miyamoto just didn't like it. He thought it was boring. And honestly, I'm kind of glad he did. It only would have revolved around sucking up mice. Which I do find this interesting that it got scrapped because Miyamoto didn't like it, because they actually did bring it back for Luigi's Mansion 3. Kind of. You know, there's the crows mission where you have to strobe up all the crows, which is one of my least favorite things to encounter in the Scarescraper. I don't know who thought this would be a fun idea. But yeah, this idea was actually originally intended for Dark Moon, kind of just with the mice, but it was scrapped, and I'd say thank God it was scrapped. Especially because with how Dark Moon's Scarescraper is structured, you basically kind of just choose one mode and go along with it. You can obviously get the remix, but you choose one mode for the most part and go along with it. The Hunter mode, the Polterprep mode, etc. So having a mode where you're just sucking up the mice, that sounds mega boring. There was actually a whole entire multiplayer mode cut from Luigi's Mansion 2, being Haunt and Seek, which was a 1v3 mode where one player takes control of Luigi and the other three can take control of some ghosts, and as Luigi you have to walk around a generated mansion and find a bunch of keys, and as the ghost team your objective is to scare, you know, Luigi and take his keys and I guess prevent him from proceeding. I actually really like this idea. I do hope that this is something they do revisit. Get rid of that Scream Park or whatever the frick that was they added to Luigi's Mansion 3 and give us something cool like that. That was actually a really cool idea that I do wish they fleshed out. So the next and last point I have about Luigi's Mansion 2 is actually really interesting because it's got a couple different layers to it. Miyamoto had a lot of stuff reworked in Luigi's Mansion 2. You know, Next Level Games would show them something and Miyamoto would be like, nope, take it back to the drawing board, you gotta do this differently. And apparently, this was very heavy with the bosses. Now, each boss was redesigned at least once, every single one. And there's a couple particular notes I do have from this. First off, in Haunted Towers is arguably one of the worst boss fights in the whole entire game. Here, you fight a giant staircase, like whoop-de-frickin-do. Now, apparently, Next Level Games actually had the idea of fighting some sort of plant at the top of Haunted Towers, and actually, I would have much preferred that over the staircase, to be honest, but Miyamoto insisted specifically that it was a staircase. Because of the fact that he doesn't want there to be anything cliche, he wants all of the bosses to seem unique, and a plant didn't seem unique enough to him. Now, I do get it, to not go based off of cliches, to not do the generic things that, you know, Nintendo always does, I completely get that. But with plants, there's so many different things you can do, so many different avenues they could go down with that idea, you know, and especially because it's well themed to the mansion, it makes sense. Like, yeah, the stair boss makes sense kind of because in the last mission there's a bunch of stairs you have to go up, but like the whole mansion revolves around plants. So having that boss themed as such makes sense. I mean, the rest of the bosses are like that. You have a clock in the Clockworks, an ice boss in the Ice Mansion. These bosses make sense. This one just stands out as weird. And it honestly kind of reminds me of Paper Mario the Origami King, where you just fight a sentient pair of scissors, a sentient rubber band man, whatever. Here, it's like literally just a staircase that's sentient. So, really did not like that idea at all. Completely wish they actually did the plant idea that Next Level Games originally had. Apparently, the boss that was scrapped and redone the most, and obviously so, was the ice boss in the secret mine. Apparently, at least 4 times they had to kind of redo this boss. Now, I don't know if they specifically mean the design, specifically like in terms of just visually, or the boss fight itself. In this video, they actually do say that right before they made the final version of this boss fight, they actually did rework it because before, they thought it looked not good. They thought it was not fun, and now they made it more exciting. And given how much I absolutely hate that boss fight, I honestly wonder how much worse it was before they made these reworked, tweaks and fixes. I really did not like this boss fight. It does seem kind of cobbled together, kind of rushed, because all you do is aim and shoot a thing. It seemed very haphazardly put together. So it makes sense that this boss was redone so many times and probably rushed. And apparently there was a whole other boss fight that was kind of kicked and booted, which was apparently based off of mirrors, where, you looked in the mirror and everything was kind of like inverted or something was weird, and they didn't have much detail on it since it was cut pretty early on. But they said something about speculating about you having to use the mirror to have the boss walk off a cliff. That actually sounds like a kind of cool idea that kind of evolves off of the first game, where you use the mirrors to catch the invisible grabber ghosts in the mirror room. It actually evolves off of that quite well, and I do like that idea, and I kind of do hope to see that evolved in another Luigi's Mansion game. Alright, moving on to Luigi's Mansion 3 and stuff that was cut from this game. Now, we all know on the 8th floor, Paranormal Productions, there were these TVs that were integral to the floor that let you kind of travel around the floor without having to use any of the doors. Well, apparently, this was initially intended to be used as a fast travel system throughout the mansion. I'm guessing this was sorted out before they came up with the elevator, because the elevator kind of accomplishes that task. But I'm kind of glad they cut it. It's kind of cheesy, kind of like, I don't know. I never liked the idea of Luigi just kind of going through technology. It's one thing if it's one of Professor Egad's inventions, but the fact that, like, King Boo also has this technology, I don't care for it. So, yeah, I'm kind of glad they restricted it to just that one floor, and it's probably one of my least favorite elements, to be completely honest. Now, this next point is actually really interesting, because if this point had worked out, I actually might have liked Luigi's Mansion 3 a bit more. Now, the reason they initially chose a hotel for the location of Luigi's Mansion 3 wasn't because of the amount of diverse locations you can put inside it, but it was because of the fact that hotels are pretty uniform, which is kind of ironic because Last Resort is definitely not uniform, but where rooms like room 101 would be right below room 201, which would be below room 301, etc., etc., and they were thinking about making puzzles that intertwine the floors. So, like, let's say there was a flood on the second floor in room 203, below in room 103 you would see a leak and have to figure out a puzzle to go up and, do something up on the second floor. I think that is a great concept, which is what I've been saying about 3 from the beginning, that it just lacked interconnectivity. The hotel felt separate. It didn't feel like a complete hotel to me. It felt like all these individual floors were their own thing, separated by a loading screen by ways of the elevator, and it really led to the mansion not feeling complete to me. One of my favorite things about the original mansion is that it just feels complete. You go back to previous areas to sort out puzzles and to do things that you couldn't do before, and it really felt like that. And Luigi's Mansion 3 didn't do that much, and when it did, it was usually for like Polterkitty or saving a toad or doing some kind of fetch questy mission like that, and not actually a really cool puzzle that uses the floor's elements. So I really think that this is a wasted opportunity. Apparently it is because Next Level Games just kind of bit off more than they can chew. And that's kind of what Luigi's Mansion 3 seems to me in a lot of ways. It seems like they had a lot of ideas on dartboard. They threw it. Okay, what kind of floor should we have? Desert floor. All right. Ooh, a restaurant in a river with a pirate ship. Okay. Like, nothing seems fully fleshed out. No singular idea they had, like with the powerful vacuum. Like, nothing seemed fully developed, in my opinion. So I feel like it was like they had these grand ideas that just didn't end up happening. So as great as Luigi's Mansion 3 was, I do see how this limitation actually happened. Apparently, there were also ice and fire themed floors for this mansion. These got cut because Miyamoto deemed them too generic, which I do find funny because you have the desert theme and the plant theme, but whatever. But nevertheless, I'm glad they made this change. Having a lava/fire and then ice themed floor would have totally, like, yeah, you got the standard New Super Mario Bros. Formula there. I do think an ice floor could have worked if they made it, like, not like a snowy thing, like, other Mario games, but like the floor, like it's a hotel floor, but everything's just kind of frozen over. I think that could have worked. But like, I do see why they cut it. It does make sense. I'm glad they cut it, especially if it led to us getting more unique themes like the Twisted Sweets floor or the Fitness Center floor, all that jazz. So touching on DLC for a second, because Luigi's Mansion 3 got some multiplayer DLC, both Nintendo and Next Level Games were actually asked about single-player DLC and what they thought of the ideas. Now, both Nintendo and Next Level Games took these in completely different directions. Nintendo took it in the direction of, would you want to expand upon the hotel you already have? And to that, Nintendo says, no, we don't really want to expand this idea because it doesn't make sense for the story that we have told. And that makes complete sense. So I do understand why Nintendo had that answer to that question. But then you flip it over to Next Level Games, who took it as having more so of an expansion, something set differently, like in a different location than Luigi's Mansion 3, which they said they wanted to do, but basically they didn't do because doing multiplayer stuff would be easier. And when I first heard that, I was like, this is kind of the lazy way out. Like, oh, okay. You chose the easy way out, developing multiplayer DLC for Scream Park. Be honest, how many of you guys play Scream Park? I feel like there are people out there who play Scream Park, but like, it's one of those stupid modes they added. Like, why? Like, having all these stupid games, like, I don't want that. Like, to me, I don't need that. Just evolve Scarescraper more, do more with the story mode, and maybe have like one other little side mode. Not all these Mario Party lame mini games that aren't needed. Like don't do that. Like, it's just not needed, in my personal opinion. But like I said, I initially thought that was like, ugh, naturally. But the response after that actually makes it a bit interesting. They said that they're actually they might hold on to these ideas to use in a future title. Which leads us to our next topic, being Luigi's Mansion 4, because obviously we're still waiting on it. I mean, it hasn't been that, actually it's been a little over 4 years now since Luigi's Mansion 3 has come out. So I guess Luigi's Mansion 4 can happen any year now, coming up the next few years, it could definitely happen. So if they have cut ideas that they were going to use in some sort of expansion that they want to use in 4, that's cool. I mean, if they were going to do some sort of expansion, obviously it wasn't going to be a huge thing. So obviously I hope they develop on it more so that it doesn't feel like an expansion that was just kind of bloated out and sold to us for $60 or $70, depending on what Nintendo wants to do for their next console. But I do want to see a really, you guys kind of know what I want for Luigi's Mansion 4, so I won't blabber on too much about it, but I do want them to kind of expand a little bit more. I want them to add some, take out all the fluff and the padding and the unnecessary backtracking, and have some backtracking that makes sense, locked rooms and areas that you can only get when you get something later, as opposed to just going back just to capture a cat or something. And this kind of goes along with the last point I have. Something that Next Level Games said is they're kind of wondering what they can do or what they should do next after the fact that, alright, Luigi's Mansion 3 took place in a hotel, what do we do next? I have loads of ideas, all of which revolve around a singular mansion. Like I said, I won't go on too much about it, I promise, but please go back to a singular mansion. If you have half of your games not being in a mansion, then Luigi's Mansion is a useless title. Go back to a mansion. Multiple mansions, sure, but I prefer a singular mansion that is complex, that has a lot of intricacies, a lot of hidden areas. Do something like that, and I'll be set. I don't need lots of mansions. I don't need a theme park. I don't need a cruise ship. I don't need a hotel. I don't need a castle. Just a mansion that's expansive, pretty dang big, lots of hidden nooks and crannies, nice and spooky, dirty. It sounds like a lot, but for a haunted mansion, that's not a lot to ask for. So Next Level Games, please do it. so there you have it, guys. That's all the new news from this, Did You Know Gaming video. This video ended up being a lot longer than I anticipated it being, so hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you did, definitely do like and subscribe, all that stuff down below. And yeah, so until next time, you guys, I'll see you in the next video.